I remember that so we actually met a few years ago, as you know, because I signed up. I was just before I'd even written any poem, I signed up for this poetry slam, and I wanted to do something that was going to make me feel super uncomfortable. So I signed up for this competition, and I was like, I didn't know what was to expect, and then yeah, it was exactly that. It was 3 minutes, and then I think there was eight judges in the audience.
Five.
Five was
It's
it?
five, yeah.
Oh yeah, five judges and eight performers was what
Hmm.
it was. Um, and then I was just up on the stage, and I remember as well that I got the time of it wrong. So I thought I could like learn my poem in a few hours, and then I was like sat eating my lunch, and it came up with the event on Facebook, and it was 2 hours before I thought it was, and I was like, oh my God.
Oh.
And I went there, and I was the only person that was reading mine off my phone. Everyone else had learned it properly and was like really performing, and I just like read it off my phone, came last, and I was
But
just
this is up to the poets. I mean, in Greece, at the slam I'm organizing in Greece, I have it prohibited. People cannot read; they
yeah,
have to memorize the poems. But this is just in Greece, nowhere else. You can read. The thing is that when you memorize the poem, it's a different experience
mm,
for you and for the audience. If you read, it's super cool as well, but it's a different experience
yeah,
because it's more difficult to connect with the audience. And what we want, I mean, actually, what I like when I'm on stage is to connect with the audience because your performance is changing depending on the energy you receive from the audience. So the same poem can be different
mm,
every time, depending on the connection you have. If you read, it can be perfect, obviously, but you lose this. It's very difficult to read and connect.
yeah. In my case, I was so nervous and reading it, so my
I
performance
think
was
it's more difficult to read
terrible. I actually think that
sometimes.
as well now
Yeah.
because now, I do open mics and sometimes I go to events where they invite me to. But at the open mics, sometimes if I've just finished a poem, I'll read it, just for the practice of like seeing how it sounds out loud. But it is way harder reading it.
Yeah, that's what I do actually. In
It's
open
so
mics,
hard
normally I read.
because like there are some people who are naturally really good at it and they can read and then they look up at the audience, they
Yeah,
can read, they look up and
I
they look
can't.
around. But for me, if I'm reading it, I'm concentrating on reading it, and that's that. Whereas if you do learn it and you know it well, then it gives you that freedom to
Exactly.
be kind of, not that I'm particularly good at the performance side of it, but you at least you can see the audience. Well, usually you can't even see them that much because the lights are so
Yeah,
bright, they're
but you
blinding
can
you. But
feel them.
you can at least look around and you can feel it. And when
Hmm.
people are laughing, you can stop and you get that sense more. And it is because I suppose the three different categories you get, and I only found this out recently, the difference between poetry and spoken word. And now I know it's super obvious. Spoken word is spoken word, and poetry is written for the paper usually. That's the
Hmm.
distinction. So usually poetry is on paper and then it's read out as if it was like from a book or something, whereas spoken word is designed to be performed,
Yeah,
and that's the difference. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense why it's called spoken word. But then
yeah.
slam is like the competitive version.
Slam is the competitive, and it's there are rules and it's tournament. Then you have in your mind, oh my god, if I win, I can go there and this biggest event or whatever. And it shouldn't be like that actually. But yeah, it's a normal way human beings. So it's like yeah, if you're gonna go actually abroad, the easiest way is to win slams.
Yeah. Well, I think it, I mean, I know that some people they're against the competitive side of it because they're like
Yeah,
art shouldn't be competitive, and I totally understand that point. But then I also totally understand human nature, and it's
yeah.
like we are competitive, and it's also when you put yourself forwards and you do something super personal and uncomfortable for most people, like at least at first when you're not used to it, it's difficult releasing that emotion out. And obviously, you get a few claps, that's rewarding. You win a poetry slam competition, super rewarding. It's
Mhm.
feedback for the hard work you've put in, and it's natural.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean that if you become last, that you weren't good. You know what I mean? Because it's like these five people judging you. Maybe these people they wanted to listen to love poems this day, so somebody who did that super good love poem wins, and then next day the judges they want to listen to social or political poems, and this person would be last. So it's not like it doesn't mean that you are the best if you win
No,
a slap.
100%, 100%, because part of it, I suppose, is writing for the audience, writing something that's going to be universally liked, which is a different skill.
It cannot be universal. I mean, even this now that I have the experience, I mean, maybe you have a masterpiece here, like in Barcelona, everybody loves it, and you go in Spain, and it's this super poem, and then you go and perform this poem in London, and they're like, oh my God, that's just it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it depends where you live, what are the struggles at this period in this country. So because you write about this stuff anyway, or even, I mean, if I do hear a poem for, and the theme is like LGBTQI plus themed, based, if I do it here, people will be like, okay, but here it's not that problem, But if I do it in Greece or somewhere that people are struggling more there, it will be like, oh my God, wow. That's what I mean. It depends where you live, what you live, and what you write, and you can go somewhere else in this poem. Or people from Africa now at the World Cup. I mean, actually, the champion is from South Africa, but because the poem, I think, was like it had like super strong stuff inside, but general as well. But people who were just talking just for the struggles in Africa. Just, I mean, the Europeans couldn't realize what's happening. I mean, they cannot feel it. They cannot empathize so much. So this poem there is perfect, but in Europe maybe it's not that. Not that it's not perfect, but people cannot enter.
Yeah, yeah.
They cannot, feel like you feel